I, 62, have always believed that music is the thread that ties a family together. For as long as I can remember, our annual family talent show has been the highlight of my year. It was a tradition I started with my late husband, a way to make sure that no matter what happened in our lives, we would always have a moment of shared joy, of silly songs and clumsy magic tricks. After he passed, I kept it going. It was my connection to him, and my gift to our children and grandchildren. I was a music teacher for 40 years. Singing is not just something I do, it is a part of who I am. My voice, though older now, is still strong, and my greatest happiness came from seeing my granddaughter, Chloe, watch me with wide, adoring eyes as I sang the old lullabies and show tunes we both loved. But this year was different. This year, the thread was cut. The talent show was held in my son Mark's backyard. He and his wife, Jessica, had a pristine lawn and a patio that looked like it was pulled from a magazine. Everything in their life was about appearances. Jessica, especially, valued a certain kind of perfection. She was Mark's second wife, and since she had entered our lives, things had slowly, almost imperceptibly, begun to change. There was a new tension, a new focus on what things looked like from the outside. My relationship with Chloe, who is 10, started to feel managed. Our spontaneous afternoons of baking and singing were replaced by scheduled, supervised visits. Jessica would often interrupt us, suggesting a more productive activity for Chloe, like a Mandarin lesson app on her tablet. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself she was just trying to be a good stepmother. I told myself Mark was happy. But a knot of unease was always there, a quiet hum of something wrong. The talent show was supposed to be my safe harbor. It was the one place where my role was clear, where my contribution was cherished. Or so I thought. I had been planning my song for weeks. It was an old classic, one that Chloe and I had sung together 100 times in the car. I had even bought a new shawl for the occasion, a soft blue that brought out the color of my eyes. When my turn came, I walked to the small, makeshift stage Mark had set up near the rose bushes. I smiled at the collection of family members sitting in lawn chairs. My other son, David, gave me a thumbs up. My sister, Carol, beamed at me. I looked for Chloe and found her sitting between Mark and Jessica. She was not smiling. Her face was tight and anxious. I took a deep breath and addressed the microphone. This next song is a very special one. It's for my beautiful granddaughter, Chloe. I saw Jessica lean over and whisper something in Chloe's ear. Chloe's little face crumpled for a second, then hardened. She stood up. Her voice, when it came out, was shockingly loud and clear in the quiet backyard. "Grandma, sit down." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air went out of my lungs. I must have misheard. I looked at her, a weak smile fixed on my face. "What was that, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice trembling just a little. She took a step forward, her hands clenched into tiny fists at her sides. I said, "Sit down. You're going to embarrass us." A collective gasp went through the family. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, a mixture of pity and shock. I looked at Mark. He was staring at the ground, refusing to meet my gaze. Jessica, however, was looking right at me. She had a small, tight smile on her face. It was a look of triumph. In that single sickening moment, I understood. This was not Chloe speaking. This was a carefully rehearsed line, a performance orchestrated by Jessica and enabled by my son's silence. My heart shattered. It was not just the public humiliation. It was the use of my granddaughter as a weapon against me. It was the casual cruelty of it. All the small slights, the canceled plans, the polite but firm rejections from Jessica, they all coalesced into this one brutal moment of public shaming. I could not sing. I could not speak. I just stood there, holding the microphone, the blue shawl suddenly feeling like a lead weight on my shoulders. My sister Carol started to get up, her face a mask of fury, but I gave a tiny shake of my head. I would not make a scene. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. With as much dignity as I could muster, I placed the microphone back in its stand. I turned and walked back to my chair, My eyes focused on a distant point in the sky, refusing to look at anyone. I sat down. The show continued. Someone's kid told some jokes. My nephew played the guitar, badly. But I heard none of it. All I could hear was my granddaughter's voice, echoing in my head. "Grandma, sit down." I stayed until the end. I ate a piece of cake I could not taste and accepted sympathetic pats on the back from relatives who did not know what to say. Mark and Jessica avoided me. They kept Chloe close to their side, as if protecting her from a contagion. When it was time to leave, I walked to my car alone. As I drove away, I finally let the tears fall. It was a deep, wrenching grief, not just for the ruined day, but for the loss of something I could not name. It was the loss of trust, the loss of my place in my own family. And as I cried, a new feeling began to rise from the ashes of my humiliation. It was a cold, hard anger. They had crossed a line. They had used a child to hurt me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would not let it stand. The show was not over. They had just given me my new material. The drive home was a blur of tears and red taillights. Every time I thought I had composed myself, the image of Chloe's face, so serious and so cold, would flash in my mind, and a fresh wave of grief would wash over me. It was not just the words she said, but the way she said them. There was no childish petulance in her voice. It was a flat, rehearsed delivery, as if she were reciting a line from a play she did not understand. And, in a way, she was. Jessica was the director, and my own son was the silent producer. When I got home, the silence of my small house was deafening. I walked into the living room and saw the sheet music for the song I had planned to sing sitting on the piano. I picked it up and, in a sudden fit of rage, I tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. The anger felt hot and clean, a welcome change from the cold shame I had felt in that backyard. I sat on the piano bench, my hands trembling. I had to understand what had happened. This was not a spontaneous act of a 10-year-old girl. This was a calculated move.
Why?
What had I ever done to Jessica to warrant such cruelty? I had always been kind to her, welcoming her into the family, even when I had my private reservations. I had seen the way she looked at our family traditions, not with warmth, but with a kind of detached assessment, as if she were deciding which pieces to keep and which to discard in her renovation of my son's life. My talent show performance, it seemed, was something she had decided to discard. I picked up the phone and called my sister, Carol. Her voice was tight with anger when she answered. "Are you okay?" she asked, skipping any preamble. "No, Carol, I'm not," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I don't understand. Why would they do that?" "Because they're cruel, selfish people," she spat. "Jessica has been trying to sideline you since the day she married him, and Mark is too weak to stand up to her. I saw her, I saw her whisper to Chloe right before she stood up. She coached her. She set that poor girl up to break her own grandmother's heart." Hearing her confirm my suspicion did not make me feel better. It made it worse. "But why? What is the point?" "The point is control," Carol said, her voice firm. "Jessica wants to be the matriarch. She wants to be the center of Mark's world, and by extension, Chloe's world. You, with your history and your traditions and your deep bond with Chloe, are a threat to that. You represent the past. You represent his first family. You represent Tanya."
Tanya.
Chloe's mother. The mention of her name brought another layer to the situation. My relationship with Mark's ex-wife was good. Unusually good, I suppose. Tanya and I had bonded during the difficult years of her divorce from Mark. She was a good mother, a fierce and funny woman who was raising Chloe with love and strength, despite Mark's often inconsistent presence in their lives. Jessica hated that I was still friends with Tanya. She saw it as a betrayal, a sign that I had not fully accepted her as Mark's true partner. "She's trying to erase Tanya," I said, the realization dawning on me. "And she's using me to do it. If she can sever my bond with Chloe, she can weaken Tanya's influence." "Exactly," Carol said. "It's a power play. And she used the most public stage imaginable to do it. in front of the entire family. We talked for another hour, my sister's righteous anger a balm on my wounded spirit. She told me I had to fight back, that I couldn't let them get away with it.
But I did not know how.
What could I do? Yell at them? Refuse to see them? That would only punish Chloe, and it would give Jessica exactly what she wanted. Me, out of the picture. There's something else going on here, Carol said thoughtfully, after a long silence. This level of desperation, it's not just about social standing. People who are this obsessed with appearances are usually hiding something. What do you know about their financial situation? I thought about it. Not much, I admitted. Mark got a new job a couple of years ago. They bought that big house. Jessica doesn't work. They just got a brand new car, a fancy German one. Mark told me he got a huge bonus at work. A huge bonus, Carol repeated, her tone skeptical. And yet, when your cousin asked for a small donation to the church fundraiser last month, Mark said they were a little tight on cash. Doesn't that seem strange to you? It did now. I had not thought much of it at the time, but pieced together with everything else, it felt off. People with a huge bonus are not usually tight on cash. People who are happy and secure do not need to humiliate an old woman in their backyard. The knot of unease I had been feeling for months tightened.
Carol was right.
Something was wrong in my son's perfect-looking life. And I had a sinking feeling that the cruelty I had experienced was just a symptom of a much deeper disease. After I hung up with Carol, I could not sit still. Her words echoed in my head. They are usually hiding something. I paced my small living room, the torn pieces of sheet music crunching under my feet. What could they be hiding? The new car, the designer clothes Jessica always wore, the constant stream of glossy photos from weekend getaways she posted online all painted a picture of wealth and success. But Mark's comment to our cousin suggested a different reality. I decided to start with what I knew. My other son, David, was more grounded than Mark. He was a quiet, observant man, a carpenter who valued honesty and hard work over flashy displays of wealth. He and Mark were not as close as they used to be, but they still talked. David might know something. I called him the next morning. I was careful to keep my voice light, not wanting to sound like a hysterical mother. "David, darling, how are you?" I asked.
"I'm good, Mom," he said.
His voice was warm, but I could hear a note of concern in it.
"How are you?"
I felt so bad about what happened yesterday. It was completely out of line.
"I'm okay, I lied."
I just wanted to check in.
I was thinking about Mark.
He seems a little stressed lately, don't you think? There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I guess," David said slowly. "Things at his work have been tough." My ears perked up. Tough? How so? I thought he got a big promotion. Another pause. This one was longer. "He told you he got a promotion?" David asked, and the surprise in his voice was genuine. "No, not a promotion, a bonus." I corrected myself, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "A really big one. That's how they afforded that new car." "Mom," David said, his voice dropping lower. "He didn't get a bonus. He got passed over for the promotion he was expecting."
He was really upset about it.
"He told me they were going to have to cut back on a few things." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. He had lied. Mark had lied to me, to the whole family, about his work. The new car wasn't a celebration of a bonus. It was a desperate attempt to cover up a failure. It was a prop in the play of their perfect life. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I must have misunderstood." "Maybe," David said, but he did not sound convinced. "Listen, Mom. Be careful with Mark and Jessica right now. They're on edge. It's all about the image with them. And they don't like anything that threatens it." His words were a clear warning. Humiliating me at the talent show wasn't just about controlling Chloe or sidelining me. It was about controlling the narrative. My simple, heartfelt song was a threat to their carefully constructed image of modern, sophisticated success. I was a relic from a past they wanted to bury, a past that included things like financial struggles and first wives. After I hung up with David, I sat in silence for a long time. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. It was not just about a moment of cruelty, it was about a foundation of lies. My son was living a life he could not afford, and he was so terrified of anyone finding out that he was willing to hurt his own mother to protect his secrets. There was one more person I needed to talk to. The one person who would know the truth about Mark's financial situation better than anyone. I took a deep breath and dialed Tanya's number. When Tanya answered the phone, her voice was cheerful. "Hey there. How are you doing? I heard the family talent show was yesterday. Did you wow them with your golden pipes?" Her innocent question was like a knife to the gut. I took a shaky breath. "Tanya," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Something happened. Can we talk?" The cheerfulness in her voice vanished instantly. "Of course," she said, her tone shifting to one of serious concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I told her everything. I told her about the song I had prepared, the new shawl, the hopeful look on my face. And then I told her about Chloe standing up, about the words that came out of her mouth, and the look of triumph on Jessica's face. As I spoke, the dam of composure I had built around myself finally broke, and I started to cry, quiet, heartbroken sobs. Tanya listened without interrupting. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, a steady, calming presence. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she said a single word, her voice filled with a cold, hard fury that mirrored my own. "That witch. She coached her, Tanya," I whispered. "She put those words in our daughter's mouth." "I know she did," Tanya said. "Chloe would never, ever say something like that to you on her own. She adores you. This has Jessica's fingerprints all over it. She's been trying to turn Chloe against me for years, and now she's starting on you. But why?" I asked again, the question that had been tormenting me. "Because we're the loose ends," Tanya said grimly. "We're the reminders that her perfect little family was built on the wreckage of another one. We don't fit into the picture she's trying to sell. So, she's trying to cut us out." Her words resonated with the truth I was beginning to uncover. This was an erasure. A systematic campaign to remove any trace of Mark's previous life. Then I decided to take a leap. I had to know if my suspicions were correct. "Tanya," I said, my voice low. "I need to ask you something, and you can tell me if it's none of my business. How are things with, the child support?" There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was weary, drained of all its earlier fire. "He's 6 months behind." The words landed in the pit of my stomach like a stone. 6 months. What? I breathed. But the new car. The vacations Jessica posts pictures of every other weekend. "I know," she said, and I could hear the bitterness in her voice. "I see them too. Every time she posts a picture of them drinking champagne on some beach, I have to go to the grocery store and decide between buying fresh fruit or paying the electric bill. He tells me he's broke. He told me he lost his job and is doing freelance work just to get by." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. He had told me he got a bonus. He had told his brother he was passed over for a promotion. And he had told the mother of his child that he was unemployed. My son was a weaver of fictions, creating a different story for everyone in his life, all to support the grand illusion of his success. "He didn't lose his job, Tanya," I said softly. "He still has it. He just didn't get the promotion he was counting on." "You're kidding me," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and disgust. "So, he's been lying to me this whole time. He has the money. He's just choosing not to pay for his own daughter." "It seems so," I said, my heart aching for her, for Chloe, for the man my son used to be. "I've been trying to be patient with him," Tanya continued, her voice gaining strength now, fueled by anger. "For Chloe's sake. I didn't want to drag him to court. But this is the last straw. The hypocrisy is just staggering. He buys a $60,000 car, but claims he can't afford to buy his daughter new shoes for school." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep, ragged breath. "It's funny," she said, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. "I've been so angry lately. I've been doing what I always do when I'm angry. I write." Tanya was a writer. Specifically, she was a rapper. She performed at local open mic nights, her lyrics sharp, witty, and brutally honest. It was a part of her that Jessica and Mark despised. They found it unseemly, undignified. They had once told Chloe that her mother's music was for angry people. "I wrote a new piece," Tanya said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's about him. About all of it. The lies, the hypocrisy, the Instagram life versus the reality. It's pretty raw." A strange idea began to form in my mind. It was a wild, audacious, and frankly terrifying idea. But it felt right. "Tanya," I said, my voice barely audible. Would you read it to me?" There was a moment of hesitation. Then she said, "Okay. But don't say I didn't warn you. It's not one of your show tunes." She cleared her throat, and then she began to speak. It was not singing, not really. It was a rhythmic, percussive recitation, each word a punch. "Yo, check the mic 1, 2, this ain't no fairy tale," she began. "This is a story about a man who's too big to fail. In his own mind, a king on a cardboard throne. But he forgot the real queen he left all alone." She kept going, her voice rising in intensity. She laid out the whole story, every sordid detail, in clever, cutting rhymes. "Got a new whip, German steel, shiny and black. A down payment made on a promise you took back. You told me you were broke, work was slow, times were tough. While your new wife's posting pics, yeah, we've all seen enough." My hand flew to my mouth. It was all there. The lies. The car. The social media posts. Vacations in the sun, 5-star hotel suites. But your daughter's at home needing new cleats for her feet. You text her, "Love you, princess," with a heart emoji too. But love's a verb, an action, something that you do. The lyrics were a perfect, brutal indictment. They were the truth, distilled into a weapon. As I listened, the wild idea in my head began to solidify, to take shape. The anger I felt was no longer just a hot, useless emotion. It was becoming cold, sharp, and focused. Jessica and Mark thought they had silenced me. They thought they had won. They had no idea that they had just handed me the script for my next performance. "Tanya," I said, when she had finished. The silence on the line was thick with unspoken emotion. "That was incredible." "Thanks," she said, her voice a little shaky. It felt good to get it out. "Can you send me the lyrics?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "I want to read them again." "Sure," she said, a little confused.
Why?
I took a deep breath. "Because," I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. "I think I've just found my new song." The days that followed were a strange mixture of grief and exhilaration. Every time I thought of Chloe's face, a fresh pang of sorrow would hit me. But then I would think of Tanya's lyrics, and a surge of righteous purpose would flow through me. I was no longer just a victim. I was a woman with a plan. I knew I could not confront Mark and Jessica directly. I had tried that path before, and it had led nowhere but to gaslighting and denial. They were masters of twisting reality to suit their narrative. Any private conversation would be reframed as me being hysterical or overly sensitive. They had demonstrated that they did not respond to reason or emotional appeals. They only responded to public perception. Their greatest fear was having their perfect facade cracked in front of an audience. And I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. The annual family summer barbecue was in 2 weeks. It was the biggest family event of the year, even bigger than the talent show. It was hosted by my brother-in-law, Robert, my late husband's older brother. Robert was the undisputed patriarch of the family. He was a wealthy, old-fashioned man who valued 2 things above all else: family loyalty and financial integrity. He had built his business from the ground up and had no tolerance for liars or cheats. He was the perfect audience. The entire extended family would be there, the very same people who had witnessed my humiliation. It was the perfect stage. I printed out the lyrics Tanya had sent me. I read them over and over, until I had them memorized. They were more than just an angry rant. They were a meticulously documented case against my son. Line after line laid out his hypocrisy with devastating clarity. Talkin' about your values, your family man brand, while you're building your new house on sinking sand. Preachin' about respect, about doin' what is right. Then you turn your back on your daughter in the night. This was not just about me anymore. This was about Chloe. It was about the fact that her father was prioritizing a shiny car and a new wife over his own child's needs. He was not just disrespecting me, he was failing his daughter. And Jessica was not just a cruel stepmother, she was an active accomplice in his neglect. I decided to try one last time to handle this privately. I owed it to the man my son used to be. I called him one afternoon when I knew he would be driving home from work. "Hi, Mark," I said, my voice even and calm. "We need to talk." "Mom, I'm really busy," he said, his tone already defensive. "If this is about the talent show again, I really think you need to let it go. You're making a big deal out of nothing." "It's not nothing, Mark," I said, my patience wearing thin. "You and Jessica humiliated me. You used your daughter to do it. That is not nothing." "Chloe was just being a kid," he insisted, his voice rising. "Kids say silly things. You're the one who made it awkward by just standing there. You should have just laughed it off." The sheer audacity of his attempt to blame me left me speechless for a moment. He was not just denying his role, he was rewriting the event to make me the villain. Suddenly, Jessica's voice was on the speakerphone. "We are trying to teach Chloe to have high standards," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Frankly, your performance was a little dated. We want her to be exposed to more current, more sophisticated things." "Sophisticated?" I asked, a dangerous edge to my voice. "Is that what you call it? Teaching a child to be cruel to her grandmother? Is that part of the sophisticated curriculum you have planned for her?" "We are her parents," Jessica said sharply. "We will decide what is best for her. And what's best for her is to be surrounded by people who are positive and forward-thinking, not people who are stuck in the past." The message was clear. I was being phased out. I was stuck in the past. I was a relic. "I see," I said, my voice going cold. "Well, thank you for clarifying your position. I have to go now." I hung up the phone before they could say another word. My hand was shaking, but my resolve had hardened into steel. There would be no more gentle appeals. No more quiet conversations. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. I called Tanya back. "Tanya," I said, "I need your help. I need you to teach me how to do this." "Do what?" she asked, confused. "Your rap," I said. "It's not enough for me to just say the words. I need to perform them. I need you to teach me the rhythm, the flow, the attitude. I need you to turn me into a rapper." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, Tanya burst out laughing. It was a deep, genuine laugh of pure delight. "Oh my God," she said, once she had caught her breath. "You are my hero."
Yes.
1,000 times yes. Let's do this. And so began the most unlikely artistic collaboration of my life. Every afternoon, after my gardening, I would call Tanya. She would put the backing track on a simple, hard-hitting beat, and I would practice. At first, I was stiff and awkward. I was a retired music teacher who specialized in Rodgers and Hammerstein. My instincts were all wrong. I wanted to sing the words, to find a melody in them. No, Tanya would say patiently. "Don't sing it. Speak it. On the beat. Feel the anger. This isn't about pretty notes. It's about truth." She was a brilliant teacher. She taught me how to find the pocket of the beat, how to emphasize certain words to make them hit harder, how to use pauses for dramatic effect. She taught me about swagger, about attitude. "You're not asking for their approval," she told me during one session. "You're telling them how it is. You're the judge, the jury, and the executioner. You hold all the power." Slowly, painstakingly, I began to get it. I practiced in my car, tapping the rhythm out on the steering wheel. I practiced in the shower, the acoustics of the small bathroom making my voice sound powerful. I started to feel the words not just as a script, but as my own truth. The anger and hurt I felt began to channel themselves into the performance. I was not just reciting Tanya's story. I was telling my own. As the day of the barbecue approached, a strange calm settled over me. I was nervous, of course, but I was also filled with a sense of clarity and purpose I had not felt in years. I was no longer a grieving mother or a humiliated grandmother. I was a woman on a mission. I was fighting for my granddaughter, for my friend, and for my own dignity. A few days before the party, I had a chance encounter that solidified my resolve. I was in the local grocery store, picking out some tomatoes, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, hello there. I turned to see Jessica standing there, a perfectly curated smile on her face. She was dressed in expensive athletic wear, despite the fact that I knew she never exercised. Jessica, I said, my voice polite but cool. What a surprise. I was just grabbing some kale for a smoothie, she said, holding up a plastic bag of green leaves as if it were a trophy. Mark and I are on a health kick. It's all about wellness, you know. How nice for you, I said, turning back to the tomatoes. She was not to be deterred. She moved to stand beside me, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone. Listen, she said. I know things have been tense since the talent show. I hope you're not still upset about that. Chloe felt just terrible afterwards. The lie was so bald-faced, so shameless, that I almost laughed. Did she? I asked, meeting her eyes. That's funny. She seemed perfectly fine when you were both ignoring me for the rest of the afternoon. Jessica's smile tightened. Well, she's a sensitive child. And we're trying to teach her to be honest about her feelings. Sometimes the truth can be a little uncomfortable. I quite agree, I said, placing a few ripe tomatoes in my basket. The truth can be very uncomfortable indeed. I paused, then looked at her directly. I'm looking forward to the barbecue on Saturday, I said, my voice light and casual. I've been working on a new number. I saw a flicker of alarm in her eyes. A new number? She asked, trying to sound nonchalant. How lovely. Yes, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. It's a very modern piece. Very truthful. I think the family will find it quite illuminating. Her mask of polite concern slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the cold anxiety beneath. What's it about? She asked, her voice a little too sharp. I gave her my sweetest grandmotherly smile. Oh, you know, I said, patting her arm before walking away. Family values. I left her standing there in the produce aisle, her perfect smile frozen on her face. I knew I had planted a seed of fear. She and Mark would spend the next few days wondering, worrying, what I was planning.
Good.
Let them sweat. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety and dread they had inflicted on me. The night before the barbecue, I decided to give Mark one last chance to do the right thing. It was not for his sake, but for mine. I needed to know that I had exhausted every possible avenue before I dropped the bomb. I waited until 10 o'clock, when I knew Chloe would be in bed. He answered on the second ring, his voice wary. Hello. Mark, it's me, I said. My voice was quiet, devoid of anger. I was simply stating facts now. I know everything. What are you talking about, Mom? He asked, but there was a new tremor of fear in his voice. I know you didn't get a bonus, I said, keeping my tone level. I know you were passed over for the promotion. I know you lied to me, and you lied to David. And I know you've been lying to Tanya. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his breathing, quick and shallow. And most importantly, Mark, I continued, I know you are 6 months behind on your child support payments. I know you've been telling Tanya you're unemployed while you and Jessica have been buying new cars and going on vacations. How do you know that? He stammered. It doesn't matter how I know, I said. It only matters that I do. And tomorrow, if you have not made things right, everyone else will know it too. What do you mean? He asked, his voice a panicked whisper. I mean that I am going to stand up at your Uncle Robert's barbecue, and I am going to perform a song. And the lyrics of that song will detail every lie you have told, every payment you have missed, and every selfish choice you have made. I am going to tell the entire family the truth. You wouldn't, he breathed, a note of disbelief in his voice. You wouldn't embarrass the family like that. You wouldn't embarrass me. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Embarrass you? I said, my voice finally cracking with the full force of my pain and anger. You and Jessica stood by and watched as my own granddaughter told me to sit down and shut up in front of 30 people. You used a child to publicly humiliate me. You taught her that her grandmother's love and her mother's needs are less important than your wife's social ambitions. You don't get to talk to me about embarrassment. You forfeited that right. He was silent. I could hear Jessica whispering furiously in the background. You have a choice, Mark, I said, my voice becoming calm again. You have until noon tomorrow. You will wire Tanya every single cent that you owe her. All 6 months, plus late fees. You will send me proof that the transfer has been made. If you do that, I will sing an old, boring song from the past, just like Jessica wants. I will smile and make polite conversation and pretend that everything is fine. But if I do not receive confirmation of that payment by noon, you had better be prepared for a show. Because I promise you, it will be a performance no one in this family will ever forget. He started to bluster, to make excuses. I can't just get that kind of money by noon. You're being unreasonable. Sell the car, I said flatly. Take out a loan. Ask your wealthy brother-in-law for a handout. I don't care how you do it. You have until noon. The choice is yours, Mark. I hung up the phone. I did not feel triumphant. I felt profoundly sad. I had just laid down an ultimatum for my own son. But I also felt a sense of peace. The ball was in his court. I had given him a way out. And if he chose not to take it, then the consequences would be of his own making. I walked over to my piano, picked up the printed lyrics to Tanya's rap, and began to practice. I had a feeling I was going to need to be ready. The next day, noon came and went. My phone remained silent. There was no text, no email, no confirmation of a wire transfer. Nothing. Mark had made his choice. He had called my bluff. He still believed, after everything, that I would not go through with it. He still believed his mother's love for him would outweigh her own self-respect. He was wrong. I spent the afternoon getting ready. I did not choose an outfit to blend in. I chose a bright red dress, a color of defiance and strength. I did my hair and makeup with care, not to look younger, but to look formidable. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a sad, old woman. I saw a warrior. The drive to Robert's house was surreal. The anger and sadness had receded, replaced by a strange, icy calm. I knew exactly what I had to do. The performance was no longer just about revenge. It was a necessary act of truth-telling, a course correction for a family that had lost its way. When I arrived, the party was in full swing. The backyard was filled with the sounds of laughter and music, the smell of barbecue smoke hanging in the air. I saw my sister Carol and gave her a small, determined nod. She knew what I was planning, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of terror and fierce pride. I saw Mark and Jessica holding court near the pool. They were laughing, drinks in hand, the perfect hosts of a life they had not earned. Mark caught my eye from across the lawn. He gave me a tight, challenging look, a silent dare. I met his gaze without flinching, my expression unreadable. He looked away first. Chloe ran up to me, her face lighting up in a genuine smile. "Grandma, you came." I knelt down and hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Of course I did, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it. Are you going to sing today?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. I looked over her head and saw Jessica watching us, her face a mask of disapproval. "Yes, darling," I said, loud enough for Jessica to hear. "I am." I spent the next hour making my way through the party, greeting cousins and nieces and nephews. I was polite, I was warm, I was the woman they had always known. But underneath the pleasantries, my mind was rehearsing. The beat was a steady pulse in my blood. "Yo, check the mic, 1, 2. Finally, the moment came. After everyone had eaten, Robert stood up on the small wooden deck that served as a stage. He tapped a glass for attention. All right, everyone, settle down, he said, his booming voice cutting through the chatter. Time for our usual family toasts. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? A few people got up. My nephew announced his engagement. A cousin shared a funny story about her toddler. The atmosphere was light and celebratory. Mark and Jessica stood near the stage, looking relaxed and confident. They thought they had won. They thought I had backed down. Then I stood up. A hush fell over the crowd. Every eye turned to me. I saw Mark's face go pale. Jessica's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure panic. They exchanged a frantic, whispered conversation. Mom, no, Mark said, his voice a low, urgent hiss as I walked past him towards the stage. Don't do this. Jessica grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You will not ruin this party, she seethed, her voice a venomous whisper. Think of the family. I pulled my arm away from her grasp. I am thinking of the family, I said, my voice cold and clear. I am thinking of your stepdaughter, who needs shoes more than you need a new car. As I approached the stage, Chloe, who had been standing with her parents, ran forward. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, echoing the words she had been taught to say. Grandma, please don't sing, she pleaded. You'll embarrass us. This time, the words did not break my heart. They fueled my fire. I knelt down and looked her directly in the eye. Sweetheart, I said gently but firmly. Sometimes you have to be embarrassing to make people listen. And sometimes the people who should be embarrassed are the ones who are sitting quietly in the audience. Now go sit with your Aunt Carol. I gave her a little nudge towards my sister, who enveloped her in a hug. Then I turned, walked up the 3 steps to the deck, and took the microphone from my brother-in-law. Thank you, Robert, I said, my voice steady and strong, projecting across the silent yard. I do have something I'd like to share. It's a new piece I've been working on. It's a modern style of music, you might not be familiar with it. It's called rap. A confused murmur went through the crowd. I ignored it. This song is dedicated to parents, I announced, my eyes finding Mark in the crowd. He was frozen, his face a mask of horror. It's dedicated to all the parents who understand that family is not about what things look like on the outside. It's about sacrifice. It's about responsibility. It's about putting your children first. Always. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for a second, found the beat in my head, that steady, angry pulse. And then I began. Yo, check the mic, 1, 2, this ain't no fairy tale. This is a story about a man who's too big to fail. My voice was clear and hard. I wasn't shouting, but every word was sharp, every syllable a tiny explosion. The crowd was utterly silent, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning shock. In his own mind, a king on a cardboard throne. But he forgot the real queen he left all alone. I opened my eyes and locked them on Mark. He looked like he had been turned to stone. Jessica was tugging at his arm, trying to pull him away, but he was paralyzed. Got a new whip, German steel, shiny and black, I rapped, pointing a single, trembling finger towards the driveway where the car was parked. A down payment made on a promise you took back. A gasp went through the family. People started to look from me, to Mark, to the car. The pieces were starting to click into place. You told me you were broke, work was slow, times were tough. While your new wife's posting pics, yeah, we've all seen enough. I gestured towards Jessica, whose face had gone from panicked to a blotchy, furious red. Several of my nieces pulled out their phones, no doubt scrolling through her social media feed, the evidence of her hypocrisy available for all to see. Vacations in the sun, 5-star hotel suites. But your daughter's at home needing new cleats for her feet. I saw Chloe look down at her own worn-out sneakers. The truth of the lyric, so specific and so real, was undeniable. I went on, line after devastating line. I told the whole story. The lies about his job. The missed payments. The empty promises. I channeled all of Tanya's anger, all of my own pain, into the performance. My body was thrumming with adrenaline. This was not the timid woman they had shamed in their backyard. This was someone new, someone they did not recognize. When I delivered the final lines, my voice was ringing with power and conviction. So you can keep your big house and your shiny new ride, but we all see the truth that you're trying to hide. 'Cause a real man provides, a real father stays true. And the man in this story, Mark, is you. I dropped the microphone. It hit the deck with a loud thud that echoed in the dead silence of the backyard. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the chirping of birds in the trees. The entire family was staring at Mark and Jessica, their faces a gallery of shock, disappointment, and disgust. Then, from the back of the crowd, a single person began to clap. It was my sister, Carol. Her applause was slow, deliberate, and loud. Then my son David joined in. Then a cousin. And then another. Soon, half the family was applauding, not for a great musical performance, but for an act of breathtaking courage and truth-telling. Mark finally broke his paralysis. "Mom, how could you?" he choked out, his voice thick with shame. I stepped off the stage and walked towards him until I was standing right in front of him. I was no longer performing. My voice was quiet now, for his ears only. "How could I?" I repeated. "I gave you a choice, Mark. I gave you a chance to do the right thing quietly. You chose this. You and your wife. You wanted a show. You got 1 inch." Jessica lunged forward, her face contorted with rage. "You have ruined us," she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "This was a private matter." "Child support is not a private matter," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "It is a legal and moral obligation. And you made it everyone's business when you decided to humiliate me in public. You wanted to control the family narrative? Well, the story is out now. The real 1 inch." My brother-in-law, Robert, stepped forward. His face was like a thundercloud. He was a man who rarely showed emotion, but his anger was palpable. He ignored Jessica completely and addressed my son. "Mark," he said, his voice a low growl. "Is this true? What your mother said? Is it true?" Mark could not meet his uncle's eyes. He stared at the ground, his shoulders slumped in defeat. It's a misunderstanding," he mumbled. "There is no misunderstanding," I said, my voice ringing out for all to hear. "There are only receipts and bank statements. And believe me, I have them. It was a lie. I had no such things." But in that moment, they believed me. The truth of the song was so powerful, no one doubted it for a second. Robert's jaw tightened. He looked at Mark with a level of disappointment that was more devastating than any shouting could have been. "We will be having a conversation in my study," he said. Immediately, he turned and walked towards the house, a silent command for Mark to follow. Mark, looking like a condemned man, trailed after him. Jessica stood frozen for a moment, her face a mess of fury and humiliation. She looked around at the watching faces of the family, at the judgment in their eyes. She shot me a look of pure hatred, then turned and practically ran into the house after her husband. The party was over. People began to leave, talking in hushed, urgent tones. They avoided looking at me, but it was not the pitying avoidance of the talent show. It was a new kind of avoidance, one mixed with awe and a little bit of fear. I had broken the unspoken family rule, "Thou shalt not air dirty laundry." But in doing so, I had exposed a rot that needed to be cut out. My son David came over and gave me a long hug. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with respect. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. They pushed you too far." "They did," I said, feeling the adrenaline finally begin to drain away, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. Carol came over, her arm around Chloe, who was looking at me with wide, confused eyes. "You are like a superhero, Grandma," she whispered. I knelt down in front of her again. "I love you very much, Chloe," I said. "And I will always, always stand up for you, even if it's embarrassing." She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. "I love you too," she whispered back. And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. Later that evening, my brother-in-law called me. His voice was grim. I've had a long talk with Mark, he said. He admitted everything. I've loaned him the money to pay Tanya back in full, on the condition that he sells that ridiculous car and sets up an automatic payment plan. He will be paying me back with interest. And his access to any further family financial support is, for the foreseeable future, cut off. This kind of irresponsible behavior reflects on all of us, and it stops now. The consequences were real and immediate. Mark's fake life, built on a foundation of debt and deceit, had crumbled in a single afternoon. My next call was to Tanya. When I told her what had happened, she was silent for a moment, and then she let out a whoop of joy. "You actually did it," she screamed into the phone. "You are a legend, a suburban rap god." We laughed until we cried. A few minutes into our call, she got another call. It was Mark. He called her back a moment later, her voice shaking with emotion. "He just sent it," she said, her voice thick with tears. "The whole amount." He was crying, begging me not to take him to court. He said he was sorry. "I'm glad, Tanya," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "I'm so glad." The final and most important call came a week later. It was a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a small voice said, "Grandma?" It was Chloe. "I'm using my friend's phone," she whispered. "Daddy and Jessica took mine away. They're really mad at you." "I know, sweetheart," I said gently. "That's okay. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "They made me say that at the talent show. They told me your singing was old and embarrassing, and that I had to be a modern girl. I didn't want to say it. I love your singing." The tears I had held back for so long finally came. "Oh, honey," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I know you do. And I love you. None of this is your fault." We talked for a few more minutes, her little voice a healing balm on my still wounded heart. That conversation was my true victory. It was the proof that the bond one had with my granddaughter was stronger than Jessica's manipulations, stronger than my son's weakness. Mark and Jessica became ghosts at family gatherings. They showed up, but they were shadows, their vibrant confidence replaced by a sullen, resentful silence. They had to sell the car. They had to cancel their planned trip to Italy. Their perfect life was exposed as a hollow shell. They tried to apologize to me once, a stilted, insincere speech about how they regretted the misunderstanding. I listened politely, and then I set my new terms. "I accept your apology," I said. "But my relationship with my granddaughter will no longer be managed by you. I will see her when I want to see her. We will go where we want to go. You do not get to use her as a pawn in your games anymore. Is that understood?" They nodded, their eyes downcast. They had no power over me anymore. I had taken it back. The following weekend, I picked Chloe up and took her for ice cream. Then, I drove her to a small music school in town. "What are we doing here?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Well," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I was thinking, my kind of music is a little old-fashioned, and your mom's kind of music is a little angry. I think it's time you found your own voice." I had enrolled her in piano lessons. As I watched her sit down at the keyboard, her small fingers tentatively pressing the keys, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The cycle of shame and silence had been broken. Mark and Jessica had tried to teach her that music was a weapon for embarrassment, a tool for social climbing. But I would make sure she learned the truth. Music was not a weapon. It was a voice. And she would learn to use hers to speak her own truth, whatever that might be. They had wanted a show, and in the end they got one. But the real performance, the one that truly mattered, was just beginning. They had finally learned that some family traditions refused to be silenced.